Hi, my name's Maura, and the last thing my mother ever said to me was on a folded piece of paper, "We're not family anymore. You're on your own." She left me and my brother in an ICU room while our grandma lay dying. No goodbye, no glance back, just a note and the sound of her heels walking away. 14 years later, she came knocking. Not with an apology, but a lawyer. She wanted her cut of the inheritance. After everything. But the truth? It was buried in that hospital room. And now, it's ready to be heard. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this? And where from? Drop it in the comments. You're not just hearing a story, you're stepping into a family war. What would you do if silence was the only thing she ever gave you? The ICU smelled like metal and bleach. That kind of sterile cold that sticks to your clothes even after you leave. The machines hummed and beeped, a strange rhythm that I'd learned to live by. Every beep meant Grandma was still here. Every silence felt like a dare from the universe. I sat beside her bed, my fingers wrapped around Eli's limp hand. He hadn't moved in months, his breathing steady but distant, like he was dreaming somewhere far away. I used to whisper to him, thinking he could hear me, but that night I didn't have words left. My throat hurt from holding everything in. The automatic doors hissed open, and I turned. Mom walked in. She looked like she was going somewhere better. Her fur-lined coat, the click of her heels, the red lipstick that didn't belong in a hospital full of dying people. She smelled like perfume and winter air, like she'd already left. "Maura," she said flatly, her voice thin as paper. "Is she still holding on?" I nodded. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Grandma either. She pulled a folded paper from her purse, small, creased, deliberate, and placed it on the counter beside the IV drip. She didn't even glance back at me. "Mom," I managed to say, though my voice came out more like a breath than a word. She sighed, that heavy, theatrical sigh she used when she was done pretending. "I can't do this anymore. You'll understand someday." Her heels clicked twice against the tile floor. Then she was gone. At first, I thought she was coming back. Maybe she just needed air. Maybe she was getting coffee. But the doors didn't open again. They didn't hiss or move. The air just settled. I stared at the note for a long time before I picked it up. I didn't want to touch it. My hand was shaking so badly that I had to hold my wrist to steady myself. The handwriting was hers, sharp, slanted, impatient. "We're not family anymore. You're on your own." It didn't look like much, just ink and paper. But it felt like the floor dropped out from under me. I didn't chase her, not because I was brave. I just couldn't move. My body felt locked in place, like my bones didn't belong to me anymore. I turned to Grandma, terrified she might have seen. But her eyes were closed, her chest rising and falling softly under the thin blanket. She was still here, barely. I folded the note once, then again, then again. It was small enough to hide in my palm. I didn't know why, but I couldn't throw it away. I slipped it into my pocket like it was something precious, even though it burned against my skin. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. The room was so quiet, I could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. The nurses spoke in whispers down the hall. I remember the sound of snow hitting the window, soft at first, then heavier. Chicago winters never forgive. Eli's monitor beeped in rhythm with Grandma's. I held his hand tighter, like that would tether us all together somehow. I wanted to tell him what Mom did, but what was the point? He couldn't move. He couldn't scream for me. He couldn't stop her from leaving. I looked at Grandma's face. Her skin was pale and thin, like the frost gathering on the window. Her breathing slowed. Then suddenly, her eyelids fluttered. For the first time in hours, she was awake. "Grandma," I whispered, leaning close. Her lips trembled, barely making sound. I leaned in until I could feel her breath against my ear. "Don't let them rewrite our story." Then she was gone. The machines went wild for a second, flatlines and alarms echoing like the room was screaming for me. Nurses rushed in, someone called for the doctor, and I just stood there, still holding Eli's hand, still clutching the note in my pocket. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My body didn't know how anymore. When the noise faded, when they finally covered her with that white sheet, I sat back down. The world didn't end with an explosion. It ended quietly, with the hum of machines and a folded note in my pocket. Later, a nurse came by and tried to talk to me. She asked if I wanted to call someone. I said no. Who was there to call? The only person left had already walked away. I stayed until the morning. Watched the snow pile up against the hospital windows. Watched the light change from gray to gold, even though it didn't make the room feel any warmer. Before I left, I went to Grandma's bedside one more time. I smoothed the blanket over her, brushed her hair back, and whispered, "I heard you." Then I looked over at the empty doorway where Mom had stood the night before. The note was still in my hand, the edges soft now from how long I'd held it. I folded it again and slipped it into my wallet. It fit perfectly behind my ID, like a scar you can't see but always feel. Outside, the cold slapped my face awake. The city was just starting to move. Buses grinding along icy streets, people rushing to jobs, unaware that someone's whole world had just ended upstairs. I pulled my coat tighter and started walking. I didn't know where I was going, I just knew I couldn't stay there anymore. 14 years. Later, I'd still hear that door closing. I'd still feel the weight of that note in my pocket, even when I wasn't carrying it. That was the night my mother stopped being my mother, and the night I promised myself one thing. As the machines went quiet, I promised her one thing: I'd never let that note be the last word. I didn't realize how long I'd been staring at the envelope until the tea in my mug went cold. It had arrived that morning, plain as any other piece of mail, tucked between a grocery flyer and a credit card offer. No return address, just my name, Maura Callahan, in heavy ink. The living room was quiet except for the hum of the heater and the distant ticking of the hallway clock. Outside, Chicago had traded snow for wind, the kind that howled through the tree branches and rattled the window panes. It was the kind of day Grandma would have called a good one for soup and silence. I brought the envelope into my small home office, really just a converted guest room with a desk, 2 chairs, and the old lamp I refused to replace. Avery was in the kitchen, humming low while making scrambled eggs. He always cooked breakfast on Saturdays, like it made up for everything the week tried to take from us. I sliced the envelope open with the side of my fingernail. Inside was a letter from a law firm in Oak Park. Legal language, stiff and cold, the kind that felt like it belonged in a courtroom, not a Saturday morning. It took me 3 tries to read the sentence out loud without my voice catching. Ms. Chandra Wilkes requests a legal review regarding her claim to a portion of the Arliss Callahan estate. My fingers clenched the paper. Wilkes. She'd changed her last name. Of course she had. I read it again, slower this time. The words didn't change. She was back, not in person, not with an apology, but with paperwork, claim. My mother, the woman who walked out on me and my brother while our grandmother lay dying in the ICU, wanted her share. I folded the letter once, then again, then a 3rd time, pressing each crease like I was sealing a wound. Same way I'd folded her note all those years ago. Same way I'd buried the words, "You're on your own," deep inside my wallet and deeper in my chest. Avery came in, 2 plates in hand. "Hey," he said, setting one in front of me. "Food before fury." He looked at the letter but didn't ask. That's one of the reasons I married him. He never forced anything out of me. He just waited, gentle and still, until I was ready. It's her, I said. She wants money. He sat beside me, fork already cooling in his hand. After all this time? I nodded. Do we even know if there's anything left to claim? Doesn't matter. He exhaled slowly, like he was trying to keep his pulse steady. Maybe just let it go, Mora. It's not worth digging everything up again. I looked at him. He wasn't wrong, not in the way most people would measure it, but this wasn't about spreadsheets or checks. It's not about money, I said quietly. It's about memory. Avery didn't argue. He just reached across the table and touched my hand, his thumb brushing the inside of my wrist, steadying me, anchoring me. After breakfast, I slipped the letter into the bottom drawer of my desk and grabbed my coat. I need to stop by the hospice, I told him. Janice's daughter was supposed to bring a quilt today. I promised I'd help hang it. The building was only 15 minutes away, but I took the long route. The city looked older in winter, tired, hunched, same way people do when they've been carrying something for too long. The hospice was quiet that afternoon. The halls smelled like lavender oil and lemon cleaner, and somewhere down the hallway, a television was playing an old western. In room 6, Mrs. Preston was humming. Her eyes were closed, hands resting on the blanket. Her breath came in shallow waves, but her lips moved with purpose. I froze in the doorway. That melody, soft, slow, almost childlike. You know that tune? A nurse asked gently, adjusting the oxygen line. I nodded, throat tightening. My grandmother used to sing it, I whispered. It was the one she'd hum while making biscuits, when the butter was too cold and her hands were too tired. The one she used when rocking Eli after he broke his collarbone falling off the porch swing. I closed the door gently behind me and sat next to Mrs. Preston. She didn't wake, but she kept humming. For a moment, it wasn't the hospice I was sitting in. It was my grandmother's kitchen, the windows fogged from the oven, her voice trailing through the air like the smell of cinnamon and soap. And just like that, the silence I'd kept for 14 years cracked. Not with a scream, not even with tears. Just a steady inhale, like I was remembering how to breathe. I stayed until sunset. The sky burned orange behind the bare trees, and I watched it flicker through the windows as I stood in the lobby. By the time I got home, Avery was folding laundry on the couch. He looked up, concerned but didn't ask. I handed him the note from the lawyer. She thinks I forgot, I said quietly. She thinks I've moved on. I walked to the desk and pulled out the old folded note from my wallet, the one with her handwriting, still faint but readable. I laid it next to the new letter. She was wrong. I folded the envelope again, carefully, deliberately, then slid it beneath a stack of hospice intake forms on my desk. Letting it sit there was my way of telling it, and her. It wasn't going to dictate my next move, but ignoring it, that wasn't an option either. 2 days later, I found myself standing outside a cafe downtown, palms sweating despite the November chill. The sidewalk was still slick from last night's rain, and the wind carried the scent of burnt coffee and car exhaust. I stared through the foggy glass window and caught a glimpse of myself, coat zipped, hair pulled back too tight, jaw clenched tighter. I looked like someone preparing for court, not coffee. A bell above the door chimed as I stepped inside. The place was small, cramped even, with overstuffed chairs and mismatched tables. It had the kind of charm people called vintage on Yelp, but really just meant nothing matched. The espresso machine hissed loudly behind the counter, and the air smelled faintly of cinnamon and scorched milk. It was the kind of place you came to meet old friends, not old ghosts. I chose a table in the back near the window. It gave me a clear view of the entrance and enough space to breathe. My phone buzzed once. On my way, the text read, "She was late." Of course. 10 minutes passed. Then she arrived. Chandra swept in like she owned the block. Her heels clicked confidently against the tiled floor, her trench coat cinched at the waist, pearls catching the dim light like tiny knives. Her hair, shorter now, dyed a deep chestnut, framed her face with surgical precision. She hadn't aged badly. She hadn't aged at all. She spotted me, smiled, and walked over like we were just two women meeting for a quick catch-up after Pilates. I didn't stand. "Well," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You look fine. Life hasn't been too hard on you, I hope." I held her gaze. Her voice hadn't changed. That syrupy tone, dressed in just enough civility to pass for polite, but sharp enough to cut. "I manage." The waiter approached, awkward and young. Are you two family?" Chandra let out a light laugh, casual and cruel. "Oh, no. She's just an old acquaintance. My niece." She emphasized the word like it tasted sour in her mouth. "We're not that close." I felt my face burn. The kid blinked, muttered something about water, and hurried off. Around us, the chatter dipped slightly, like people were suddenly paying a bit more attention. I didn't flinch. I didn't defend. I just smiled. "That's right," I said softly, mirroring her tone. "Some family ties aren't meant to last." Chandra blinked, just for a second. It was subtle, but I saw it, the moment she realized I wasn't the girl she walked out on. She reached into her leather tote and pulled out a white envelope. She slid it across the table like it was a dessert menu. "These are the terms," she said. "I'm not here to argue. Your grandmother would want peace." I looked down. The handwriting on the envelope was mine. It was the same envelope I used for Grandma's final tax return, addressed in my neatest script. She had kept it, or maybe stolen it. Either way, it was her little move, taking something that wasn't hers and acting like it was always meant to be handed back. I didn't touch it. "What would peace mean to you?" I asked. "A check? A title? Forgiveness?" She tilted her head, smiled. "Closure." I let the silence sit between us, thick as the cold air outside. "You know," she said, stirring her tea that hadn't even arrived, "you could have done so much more with your life. Hospice? That's your big mission?" I leaned in slightly. "It's honest work." "It's small," she replied, "but I suppose it suits you. Your grandmother always had a soft spot for limited ambition." My chest tightened, but I kept my face still. "You're good at this," I said calmly. The cutting comments wrapped in lace. She didn't deny it. I stood slowly, pushing my chair back. Around us, the murmur of conversations resumed like nothing had happened. "Mora," she said, her tone shifting, laced with something too slippery to name. "Don't be foolish." I picked up the envelope without looking at it. "Foolish would be letting you decide how this ends." She opened her mouth, but I was already walking toward the door. As I passed the cafe window, I caught my reflection. My face was still, my posture straight, but my hands trembled so slightly only I would notice. I used to beg for her love. I used to dream about her showing up, arms open, saying she made a mistake. Now I just pitied her. She thought she'd won again. But this time I wasn't 16, and I wasn't alone. I didn't sleep much after that cafe meeting. Something about her smile. It wasn't victory. It was expectation. Like she already assumed I'd fold. A week passed before I finally pulled the old file folder from the back of my drawer. The corner was frayed. I'd shoved it behind hospice case notes, hoping I could forget it was there. But now, as I sat in the passenger seat while Avery drove us through the faded streets of South Chicago, I held it like it held answers. Mr. Kellen's law office was exactly how I remembered it. Cramped, worn, and lined with filing cabinets that hadn't seen a computer update since the early 2000s. The blinds were crooked. The air smelled like dust and old receipts. Avery parked across the street and waited in the car. I told him I'd only be a minute, but we both knew I was lying. This wasn't a minute kind of visit. I stepped inside. The little brass bell over the door gave a half-hearted jingle. Behind the scratched oak desk, a man sat hunched over a folder with a magnifying glass. His glasses were slid halfway down his nose. For a second, he didn't look up. "Excuse me," I said, softer than I meant to. He blinked, then slowly rose. "Yes?" "I'm Maura Lowell, Arliss Lowell's granddaughter." The name made him freeze. His eyes squinted, then widened. "Maura," he repeated, almost like he was saying it for the first time. "You were 16 the last time I saw you. I remember the snow that day." I nodded. "You helped with Grandma's estate before she passed." He motioned for me to sit, then closed the folder in front of him. "I did. What brings you back?" I placed the envelope on his desk. "My mother's resurfaced," I said. "She wants a cut of the inheritance." He sighed and rubbed his temples. "I was afraid of this." His hands trembled slightly as he unlocked a drawer and pulled out a dusty binder labeled Lowell Personal. "I drafted 2 wills for Arliss," he said slowly. "One before Chandra left, and one later, after everything changed. The second was handwritten, witnessed by the hospice nurse. Arliss wanted everything to go to you." My heart thudded. "But after her passing, the copy vanished. I only have notes and a reference. No signed copy. Without that document—" "She never told me," I said, my voice quiet. "Not directly." "She said you'd understand when the time came." He opened the binder. Inside, among the typed notes, was a single faded photograph. He passed it to me without a word. It showed my grandmother's hands, frail, knotted with age, holding a folded piece of paper. The corner, just visible, had handwriting. I leaned closer. It read, "Family is who stays." I stared at it for what felt like forever. "Where was this taken?" I asked. "Your grandma's living room," he said. "A week before she passed. The nurse took it. She thought it was sweet. I think she meant for you to find it." I thanked him, tucked the photo into my bag, and stepped out into the fading light. The sun was just setting, casting a tired amber glow over the cracked sidewalks. I got into the car without speaking. Avery glanced at me but didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. We drove straight to Grandma's house. It had been boarded up since the estate entered probate limbo. Windows covered with plywood, the yard wild with weeds and silence. I had to jiggle the key twice before the door finally gave. Inside, time had stood still. The scent hit me first: stale air, dried flowers, and something faintly sweet. Her old perfume still clung to the curtains. Dust coated everything. A cracked vase on the mantel. Her needlepoint still in its hoop by the recliner. I wandered room to room, letting the memories wash over me like slow waves. The hallway was darker than I remembered, the kitchen smaller. Then I stepped into her bedroom. The music box was still there, tucked on the dresser. I twisted the knob out of instinct. "You Are My Sunshine" played, the notes warbling but steady. I sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress creaked beneath me, a familiar sound from childhood naps. I stared at the music box until the song ended. Avery leaned on the doorframe, watching me but saying nothing. "I don't care about the inheritance," I said finally. "Not really." He nodded once, waiting. "But that will, if she tried to erase it, if she tried to rewrite Grandma's ending, she doesn't get to do that." "She's done it before," he said. "She won't this time." I stood, walked over to the bookshelf, and ran my fingers along the spines. One slipped forward slightly. A Bible. I opened it, and inside, tucked between the pages, was another folded note. It wasn't signed, but I knew the handwriting. "I hope you forgive her someday," it read. "But if you can't, promise me you won't forget who stood by you." I closed the Bible and held it to my chest. As I stood in that empty house, I realized I wasn't just fighting for money, I was fighting for the truth buried in these walls. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of St. Helena's, clutching a photo of Grandma Arliss in both hands. It was one of the few we had left, her sitting on the porch swing, sunlight catching the silver strands in her hair, a soft smirk pulling at her lips, like she'd just outwitted someone and wouldn't admit it. The church doors were propped open, and lilies lined the entryway, their scent heavy and suffocating. Someone had taken the time to hang glossy posters by the vestibule. One caught my eye. In loving memory of Arliss Lowell, beloved mother of Chandra Lowell. That name printed in bold made my stomach twist. Nowhere, not even in the footnotes, was there any mention of me. Inside, the sanctuary buzzed with quiet conversation. Familiar faces I hadn't seen in years. People who once sat at Grandma's kitchen table, sipping her weak coffee and pretending to care. Most probably thought I had left town for good. Maybe they assumed I wouldn't show. But here I was. Avery squeezed my hand gently. "You okay?" I nodded, though my throat tightened. "Yeah, I just didn't expect it to feel this curated." He leaned in. "We don't have to stay." "I need to," I whispered. "Not for her. For Grandma." We found seats in the second-to-last row. I didn't want to be too close to the performance, but not too far that I missed the lies. Then Chandra appeared, hair swept back, not a strand out of place, pearls around her neck. She moved like someone stepping onto a stage she'd rehearsed for, shoulders squared, chin lifted. I watched her take the podium as murmurs settled into silence. She scanned the room, then placed her hand over her heart, like a politician. "Thank you all for coming today to honor my mother, Arliss Lowell. She was a woman of grace, kindness, and resilience. A mother who gave everything for her family." I blinked hard. My ears burned, though the room was cool. "She taught me what it means to love unconditionally," Chandra continued, her voice catching at just the right moment. "Even when life got difficult, she stood by us, especially me, her only daughter." Cameras clicked, heads nodded. Somewhere, someone sniffled. I sat frozen, the photo of Grandma growing damp in my hands. Then it got worse. "She passed peacefully, surrounded by those who loved her," Chandra said, pressing a hand to her chest. "And I'll always be grateful I was there in her final moments." My nails dug into my palms. Avery whispered, "You don't have to sit through this." "Yes," I said, standing. "I do." I walked down the center aisle toward the altar, holding the photo gently, like it was the last piece of her I had. I didn't look at the pews. I focused on the flowers, the wooden casket at the foot of the stage, the sunlight streaming through stained glass. Chandra spotted me as I approached the memorial table. Her smile tightened. I reached for the corner of the table and set the photo down next to the oversized framed picture she'd brought, one from a photo shoot I'd never seen. Grandma's eyes didn't even look like hers in it. Too much retouching, too much fake. As I turned to walk away, Chandra leaned in. "Don't embarrass yourself," she hissed, her voice barely audible. "This isn't your stage." I didn't flinch, but I heard it. A voice nearby asked, just loud enough to carry, "Is that her niece?" I looked up, smiled faintly. "Something like that." I returned to the back of the church, sat down in the far corner. My hands slipped into my coat pocket, brushing the worn edges of that old folded note, the one I'd carried since the ICU room. For the first time, it didn't sting. It lit a fire. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone. I tapped record. The sound of Chandra's voice continued from the podium, still weaving fiction. I lifted the mic close to my lips. "The woman they're praising left her mother to die alone," I said, my voice a whisper, but it felt louder than anything echoing off the church walls. I slipped the phone into my lap and watched. She kept talking, basking in the light, in the lies, in the applause that followed her closing words. She bowed her head in fake humility, then stepped away from the podium as a pianist started a shaky version of Amazing Grace. I rose quietly and walked down the side aisle. At the altar, someone must have brushed the flower arrangement. The lilies trembled. One petal fluttered loose and fell, landing square on Chandra's heel as she turned to shake hands with the pastor. She didn't notice, but I did. The church grew quieter as I left. Not completely silent, but subdued, like a storm had passed through and no one wanted to acknowledge the wreckage. Outside, the autumn wind cut across my cheeks. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at the stained glass until my eyes watered. Avery met me a moment later. "You did what you needed." I didn't say a word. "You didn't have to." I looked down at the phone screen. The red light blinked, still recording. "I think the truth just entered the room," I said, and I meant it. 2 days after the memorial, I woke to a shrill ping from my phone, then another, then 20 more in rapid fire. I groaned, pulled the blanket over my head, and hoped it was just a group text gone haywire. It wasn't. By the time I checked the screen, the notifications had filled the top bar like a flood. Emails, tags, mentions, missed calls from unknown numbers. My heart started hammering before I even opened anything. My fingers felt clumsy, uncertain. The video, the one I quietly recorded at the church, had gone viral. Not millions of views viral, but enough that someone had clipped my whispered words, overlaid them with Chandra's eulogy, and titled it, "Daughter Leaves Mother to Die, Granddaughter Speaks Out." I scrolled through the comments. Some called me brave, some called me bitter. One said, "There's always 2 sides. She probably just wants the inheritance." Another chimed in, "Ungrateful. Her mother's grieving and this girl goes nuclear at a funeral?" I set the phone down like it was on fire. My chest tightened. I couldn't catch my breath. From the kitchen, I heard Avery open a cabinet. "Coffee's on," he called, cheerful and unaware. I didn't move. I sat frozen in bed, the weight of strangers' opinions pressing down harder than anything my mother ever threw at me. And that was saying something. 10 minutes later, Avery walked in with 2 mugs. He took one look at me, brows drawing together. "What happened?" I handed him the phone. He watched the video, then scrolled the comments in silence. After a long pause, he said, "Well, people are cruel, but that's not news." I forced a laugh, brittle and thin. "She's playing the victim card again." He showed me the latest post from Chandra's social media account. A selfie, eyes glassy, hands folded in prayer. The caption read, "My daughter is troubled. Please pray for her. She needs healing and love right now." Thousands of likes, hundreds of sympathy comments. "I'm not even her daughter," I muttered. Avery looked at me gently. "She never stopped being your mother just because she said the words. That's why it still hurts." I stared down at my lap. She always knew how to make me the villain. She did it when I was 16, and she's doing it now. And people believe her. He didn't respond. He just reached out, squeezed my hand. Later that afternoon, I sat on the floor of our small home office, surrounded by old boxes. Paperwork I hadn't touched in years. Stuff from Grandma's room after the hospice cleared out. I hadn't had the heart to look through it back then. Now I needed it. I found the folded note again, the one she left by the IV drip. "We're not family anymore." It used to haunt me, but now, seeing it in her handwriting again and hearing her online, publicly calling me her daughter with a pained smile, it wasn't the words that hurt, it was the pattern, her rewriting the story again and again while I was left cleaning up the wreckage. I sat with the note in one hand and my phone in the other. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I made the decision. I deleted my Facebook account first, then Instagram, then X, where the hashtags were spreading like wildfire. Gone, gone, gone. It didn't bring instant peace, but it gave me room to breathe. I'm done, I told Avery later that night. I'm not answering anymore. I'm not responding. Let them talk. He nodded. You can't win against someone who plays the victim louder than you scream the truth. I looked at him, calm for the first time all day. Then I'll stop playing her game. I pulled out the file box from under my desk, the one labeled Taxes, Sar Hospice, Grandma. I opened folders I hadn't touched in years, hospital discharge papers, pharmacy logs, emails between Grandma's nurse and the facility. All of it there, just buried under dust and neglect. This wasn't going to be a war of words anymore. No hashtags, no status updates, just facts, dates, documents. Let her cry online. I'd win in silence. That thought followed me for the next 7 days, like a quiet drumbeat beneath everything I did. I didn't post. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue with anyone online. Instead, I prepared. The morning I walked into the courthouse, the air was sharp and cold. The marble floors echoed with the sound of other people's problems. Custody battles, small claims, property disputes. Mine was different, but maybe not so unusual. Every family has its war. Mine just happened to be public. People glanced up as I passed, their eyes flickering with recognition. Some probably saw the video. Some whispered, others just looked away. I kept walking, back straight, chin level. Grandma would have told me, if you're walking in truth, don't lower your head. Inside the estate division office, I met with a man named Avery Johnson, the attorney handling Grandma's probate. He wasn't related to my husband, just an odd coincidence of names. He was neat, calm, probably mid-50s, with a voice that carried quiet authority. He extended a hand. Ms. Lowell, I've read the file you submitted. Then you know why I'm here, I said. He nodded. I do, and I have to say, this is unusual. I placed the envelope on his desk. That's the original hospice documentation, the signature log from the day my grandmother passed. Look at the witness line. He slid his glasses up and scanned the page. His eyebrows twitched. Asha Monroe, he read aloud. Hospice nurse, witness present for will modification. He looked up. You were there? Yes, I said. My mother wasn't. The door opened behind us. The sound of heels. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. Still trying to rewrite history, Maura? Her voice was honey over glass. Smooth but dangerous. Chandra walked in with her lawyer, a younger man in a gray suit who smiled like he'd already won. Mr. Johnson stayed composed. Ms. Lowell, he said politely, your daughter submitted new evidence. We're reviewing fabrications, she cut in. That's what they are. My daughter has a history of exaggeration. I let her talk. Let her dig her hole. The young lawyer chuckled under his breath. Hospice logs? After 14 years? That's your proof? I didn't answer. I reached into my bag and placed a small square recorder on the table. The kind you buy at office supply stores before everything went digital. Its corners were worn, metal faded. I pressed play, static first. Then a weak, familiar voice drifted through. Maura, don't let them take what's yours. It wasn't loud, but the words filled the room like a storm breaking after still air. Chandra's expression froze. Her mouth parted, eyes darting between me and the recorder, like she wasn't sure which was real. That's not her, she stammered. But it was. That voice, frail yet fierce, was the same tone I'd heard in the ICU 14 years ago when Grandma whispered, "Don't let them rewrite our story." And now it wasn't just memory, it was evidence. I didn't smile, I didn't speak. I simply stood, closed my folder, and said to Mr. Johnson, "Everything you need is there. The rest will come from the nurse's affidavit. Understood, he said quietly. As I walked past Chandra, she muttered, You think this will change anything? I paused long enough to meet her eyes. No, I said. It already did. Then I walked out, leaving the recorder running on the desk behind me. Outside, the city noise wrapped around me, horns, footsteps, snippets of conversation. It sounded alive again, not suffocating. I took a breath that felt like the first real one in weeks. That night at home, Avery was sitting on the couch when I walked in. He looked up from his book. You didn't even stay to see her face? I set my bag down, kicked off my shoes. Some things are better left unseen. He studied me for a long moment, then smiled faintly. You look lighter. I'm not fighting her anymore, I said. I'm freeing myself. He nodded. That's the right kind of victory. I went to my desk, opened a fresh envelope, and slid a single sheet of paper inside. Blank except for one small folded note. The one from years ago. The one that once said, We're not family anymore. I didn't add a return address. Just her name and the street she ran to all those years ago. As I sealed it, I whispered, The letter she once left behind took everything from me. The one I'm sending now will take everything from her. The envelope was unmarked, cream-colored, smooth like the blank page inside. No documents, no return address, just a single sheet of paper with the words written in pencil. Silence speaks louder. I stared at it for a long minute before tucking it into my coat pocket. Outside, the early October air was crisp, but not yet cruel. The wind carried the kind of stillness that comes before things shift. Quiet, but not empty. 2 mornings later, I waited on my front porch, coffee in one hand, watching the world stretch awake. The neighborhood was already humming, dogs barking, tires on asphalt, someone's wind chimes dancing just off beat. Across the street, a white delivery van pulled up to Chandra's townhouse. Not a package service. This was a private courier. I paid extra for that. Not for speed, but certainty. From where I sat, I could see the man step out, walk up to her door, knock twice, and hand her the envelope when she opened it. No clipboard, no explanation. Just the weight of paper and history changing hands. She stood in the doorway, wearing a robe too pristine for this early hour, a mug in one hand. Probably tea. She always said coffee was vulgar. Her expression shifted as she recognized the handwriting. She opened it on instinct, like she was expecting a fight. I saw the flicker of confusion when she pulled out nothing but a blank page. Then the freeze. Her mouth didn't move. Her eyes stopped blinking. And then, she didn't do anything at all. The woman who had always filled rooms with noise, with control, now stood frozen, holding nothing. I watched from behind the lattice of porch railing, obscured but not hidden. The way she looked at that page, you'd think it screamed. But it didn't have to. That silence held everything she'd once weaponized and threw it back at her. She stayed there a few seconds more before slowly retreating inside and closing the door. No slamming, no shouting. Just the gentle click of her retreat. My phone buzzed 10 minutes later. Unknown number. But I knew. I let it ring. Once, twice. I didn't block it. I just let it die out on its own. The silence at the end of that call felt complete. Avery stepped onto the porch, still barefoot, holding his own mug. Was that her? I nodded. She won't leave a voicemail. Good. We sat side by side, watching the street return to normal. Later that afternoon, I walked upstairs to the small drawer where I'd kept Grandma's last note, the one from the ICU, the one that once shattered something inside me. I unfolded it carefully. The edges were soft now, the paper yellowed, but the words were still sharp. We're not family anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just walked to the porch again, set the note in the old glass ashtray Grandma used to keep for guests, even though she never smoked, and lit a match. It caught quickly. The handwriting curled first, disappearing into flame, then the edges, then the whole thing. I didn't move until the ashes stopped glowing. I stirred them gently with a finger, watched them lift in the breeze and scatter toward the morning sun. That same sun used to pour through Grandma's kitchen window every Sunday morning while she made biscuits from scratch and hummed hymns under her breath. She used to say, "Light is God's way of telling you there's still time to be new." I never understood it before. I do now. "She left me silence," I whispered. I turned it into peace. The wind picked up just then, lifting the last of the ashes over the railing and out into the street. Gone, but not forgotten. I didn't check my phone for the rest of the day. I didn't scroll, didn't click, didn't need to know how the world was reacting. Because peace doesn't erase scars. It teaches you how to live with them. 6 months passed like a slow tide pulling back from shore. One quiet morning at the end of October, I stood on the sidewalk in front of Grandma Arliss's old house. Though now, it barely resembled the home I once knew. The shutters were painted soft gray, the porch steps no longer sagged, and a new sign hung proudly above the door. The Arliss Foundation for Caregivers. The autumn leaves drifted down just as they had that winter, when I thought I'd lost everything. But this time, the air didn't bite. It held something warmer, lighter. The house didn't just stand for what was. It stood for what we chose to do with what was left. The case had ended months ago, quietly, like a door closing in another room. No headlines, no courtroom drama. Chandra withdrew her claim, sold her home in Evanston, and disappeared to Florida. I didn't follow the details. I didn't need to. I didn't celebrate. I just exhaled, a long, heavy breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Inside, the scent of fresh paint mingled with old wood. Volunteers moved through the rooms, some filing paperwork, others setting out fresh linens. The foundation had become a haven for family caregivers needing respite, a mission rooted in Grandma's last years, shaped by my grief and grown through quiet determination. As I walked past the entry hall, a teenage volunteer, maybe 16, no older than I was the night in the ICU, waved me down. "Ms. Lowell, this came for the foundation. It doesn't say who sent it." She handed me a plain white envelope. No return address, no note. Inside, there was only a single photograph. It was old. I recognized it immediately. The three of us, sitting on the porch swing. Grandma in the middle, arms around both Chandra and me. We were all laughing. I hadn't seen it in years. On the back, written in blue ink, barely legible. "Family is who stays." I didn't cry because I was sad. I cried because something inside me softened. Not everything breaks with noise. Some things break open with quiet grace. Later that week, Pastor Stevens stopped by. He didn't stay long, just long enough to see the space and sip a cup of tea in the front room where Grandma used to knit. He smiled gently. "I've seen a lot of loss, Maura, but what you've built here, this isn't just survival, it's resurrection." I looked down, fingers brushing the rim of my mug. "I'm still not sure if I've forgiven her." "You don't have to," he said. "Forgiveness isn't for them. It's for the part of you they broke." I nodded. I didn't argue. I didn't even explain. I just accepted it. That night, I pulled the small glass jar from the drawer by my bed. Inside, the last of the ash from Grandma's burned note. I carried it outside into the cool evening air, out back to the tree she planted decades ago. The one that still bloomed every spring no matter how harsh the winter. Kneeling down, I unscrewed the lid and scattered the ash at the base of the tree. The wind didn't blow. The earth just took it in. "Here's your piece, Grandma," I whispered. Behind me, the porch light clicked on. Avery stood in the doorway, watching. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows of the front sitting room. The same golden light that used to spill across Grandma's table while she kneaded dough and hummed "You Are My Sunshine" under her breath. The old music box still worked. Someone had found it in storage and set it on the shelf by the window. It began to play, soft and crackly, just as a burst of laughter came from down the hallway. I turned to see the young volunteer chatting with one of our elderly residents, her laughter easy and unguarded. Something about it, the light, the sound, the way they shared space, made me feel like the story had folded into something new. Not erased, not rewritten, just finally, honestly, at peace. I turned back to the window, and for the first time in my life, I didn't need her to look back, because I finally stopped looking for her.